Loyalty is a strange currency. I gave mine freely, without hesitation, believing it would bind us together through storms and silence alike. But instead of honoring it, she twisted it into a weapon, mocking the very devotion that kept me at her side. She paraded my loyalty as weakness, laughed at sacrifices no one else ever saw, and belittled the countless hours I had invested into her. What hurt most wasn't the betrayal itself, but the smugness, the way she looked at me as if I was some pitiful fool for still standing by her. That moment branded me. Because when loyalty is mocked, it stops being a gift. It transforms into fuel, a fire that demands justice. And mine would be cold, calculated, and unforgettable. Before we dive into the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching this from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and it helps me connect with you all around the world. My name is Adrian Cole. I'm 31 years old, a systems engineer at a medical technology company, and for most of my life, I thought loyalty was the highest virtue a person could offer. It wasn't just a value I respected in others, it was my compass, the principle I used to navigate every decision. My friends would joke that if they ever got stranded at 3 a.m, I'd be the one they could call, and I'd show up without hesitation. That was who I was. The dependable one. The steady hand. The man who didn't flinch when life got complicated. In relationships, that loyalty was even stronger. I believed that if you truly loved someone, you stood by them, not just when things were good, but when they were messy, painful, or difficult. I didn't expect perfection. I just expected honesty, effort, and respect. What I got instead was something I never thought possible. My greatest strength twisted into a joke, my devotion paraded as a weakness for others to laugh at. The night it happened wasn't remarkable at first. A Friday in late autumn, crisp air outside, streetlights casting long shadows as I drove across town. Work had been brutal that week, long hours debugging a server system that refused to cooperate, but I didn't mind the exhaustion. I was on my way to her apartment, arms full of comfort food I knew she loved, carnitas tacos with extra lime, a side of guacamole, and a chilled horchata in a sweating plastic cup. I had planned to surprise her, to ease her week with something simple but thoughtful. That was my way of showing love, not in grand gestures, but in the quiet consistency of remembering the details. When I reached her building, I already felt lighter. I imagined her smile when she saw the food, the way her shoulders might drop in relief at not having to cook. I thought maybe we'd spend the night in, wrapped up in blankets, watching the crime documentaries she was obsessed with. I thought I knew how the evening would go. But when I opened her door, the scene inside stopped me cold. Her living room was full of people, 5 friends, all gathered around with half-empty wine glasses and a growing pile of snacks on the coffee table. The air was thick with laughter, the kind that carries a sharpness when people have had just enough to drink. She was at the center of it, animated, gesturing wildly, her voice cutting through the room like a conductor's baton. At first, I smiled. I didn't mind surprises, I could roll with it. But then I caught the thread of her words, and the smile slipped from my face. "Adrian?" she said, in a tone that was both mocking and triumphant. "Oh, he's too loyal for his own good. If I told him to sit outside my door all night like a stray dog, he'd actually do it, and he'd probably thank me for the privilege." The room erupted in laughter. Loud, cruel, echoing in my ears. Some of her friends laughed hard, others hesitated, their glances darting toward the door where I stood unnoticed for a moment. But the damage was already done. She didn't stop there. She leaned back in her chair, smirking, and added, "Honestly, I think he wears his loyalty like a badge. Like it makes him special. But really, it just makes him easy. Predictable. You never have to worry about a man like that walking away." That's when her eyes landed on me. I was standing frozen in the doorway, the takeout bag in my hand growing heavier by the second, the smell of warm tortillas and roasted pork mixing with the sour tang of spilled wine in the air. Her expression shifted just slightly, not guilt, not even surprise, but a flicker of challenge, as though daring me to say something, to break the silence her words had carved. Time slowed. In the span of a few seconds, every memory of the small sacrifices I had made for her rushed back. The nights I stayed up late helping her finish reports for her job. The weekends I spent fixing things in her apartment, painting her walls, building her shelves. The countless drives across town when she called me saying she was lonely or anxious. I had given her my steadiness, my patience, my loyalty. And she had turned it into a joke. I forced a tight smile, stepping into the room. "Brought dinner," I muttered, setting the bag down on the counter. The laughter died awkwardly, replaced by murmurs and clinking glasses. No one met my eyes directly, not even her. She laughed again, softer this time, but the edge was still there. See? Loyal to the end, she said, sipping her wine. Her friends shifted uncomfortably, the air growing heavy with the weight of her cruelty. I didn't argue. I didn't lash out. That wasn't my way. Instead, I let the silence speak for me, my jaw clenched, my chest tight. I stayed just long enough to hand her the food before I left, the sound of laughter still echoing in my ears as I walked down the stairwell. That was the night my loyalty stopped being a gift. It became something else entirely. Something sharper. Because once loyalty is mocked, it doesn't die, it transforms. And I knew, even in that first raw moment, that this story wasn't going to end the way she thought it would. The Friday night when she mocked my loyalty in front of her friends wasn't an isolated moment. It was the climax of something that had been building for months, a pattern so gradual, so insidious, that at first I convinced myself it was nothing. A bad day here, a careless remark there. But once you start piecing the moments together, you see the truth. Contempt doesn't erupt suddenly, it leaks slowly, staining everything it touches until it's impossible to ignore. Looking back, I can see the signs as clearly as timestamps on a server log. The first instance I should have paid attention to happened nearly 6 months earlier. We were at a cafe, just the two of us, when my phone buzzed. It was my boss, asking if I could review a spreadsheet before the end of the day. I told her I needed to step aside for a few minutes to handle it. I expected patience, maybe even a small word of encouragement. Instead, she sighed dramatically, tapped her spoon against her coffee cup, and muttered, "Of course. Adrian always puts work first. That's his real relationship." It stung, but I brushed it off. I told myself she was joking, that the stress of her own job had bled into her words. I forgave quickly because that's what loyalty does, it explains away the cuts and keeps moving forward. But then came other moments. I remember one Saturday when we were supposed to meet her friends for brunch. She ran late, as usual, and by the time we arrived, everyone was already seated. I pulled out her chair for her, something I did without thinking, just out of habit. Instead of a "thank you," she laughed and announced to the table, "See? He's basically my butler. Maybe I should start paying him." Everyone chuckled politely, and I forced a smile, but inside I felt something shift. That wasn't playfulness, it was positioning. She was setting herself above me, making me the punchline while the people around us nodded along. By the time summer rolled into fall, the digs became sharper, less deniable. If I texted her to check if she got home safely after a night out, she'd reply with, "Relax, Dad. I'm fine. You don't need to babysit me." If I spent an afternoon helping her assemble new furniture, she'd joke to her friends later, "Adrian's good for heavy lifting and free labor, every girl should get one." I started keeping mental notes, the way I might log anomalies in a system. Small flags that, alone, could be ignored. Together, though, they formed a pattern. And patterns, once identified, demand attention. What hurt most wasn't just the words, but the contrast between them and the moments she wanted something from me. On nights when she was anxious, when she couldn't sleep, I was the one she called. When her car broke down, I was the one under the hood in the rain. When she had a presentation at work, I was the one rehearsing it with her at midnight, catching every stumble so she could shine the next morning. In private, she leaned on me fully. In public, she undermined me ruthlessly. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining it. That insecurity was coloring my view. So I tested it. I started pulling back, not much, just little experiments. I'd wait to see if she texted me first. I'd hold off on offering help to see if she'd notice my silence. And each time, the result was the same. She'd eventually come to me, seeking the reliability she claimed to mock, only to turn around and diminish it again when eyes were on us. The most telling moment came at her office holiday party. She introduced me to her coworkers with a smile, but the words that followed landed like ice. "This is Adrian. He's sweet. Too sweet, honestly. He'll put up with anything." Her colleagues laughed politely. One of them shook my hand and said, "Man, sounds like you're a saint." I smiled, but inside my stomach twisted. Because a saint isn't what she saw. What she saw was a man she could lean on without consequence, a man whose patience had no end. In her eyes, my loyalty didn't make me admirable, it made me expendable. That night, I went home and lay awake replaying her words, her tone, the smirk that accompanied it. And for the first time, I admitted to myself that this wasn't accidental. She enjoyed the power it gave her, the control of knowing I wouldn't leave, no matter how sharp her contempt became. The pattern was undeniable now. And once you recognize a pattern, you can either submit to it, or you can start preparing to dismantle it. I chose the latter. Patterns can be dismissed as coincidence if you're careless. But I'm a systems engineer, I deal in data, not assumptions. Once I recognized her contempt for what it was, I stopped explaining it away and started treating it like a problem to be analyzed. And with analysis comes documentation. If she was going to mock my loyalty, I needed to know whether it was just cruelty, or if it was masking something deeper. The first step was simple: keep everything. Every text message, every voicemail, every casual comment that felt off. I stopped deleting conversations. I exported backups of our chat history, setting them aside on an external drive with dates clearly marked. At the time, it felt excessive. But instinct told me this wasn't just about bruised pride. Something about her behavior was shifting too consistently, too strategically. The first inconsistency appeared in a text she sent one Wednesday night. She told me she was staying late at work, finishing up reports for her manager. The timestamp on her message read 8:17 p.m. I remember because I was at my desk, still logged into a virtual server update, and my email pinged right after with a company alert. When I texted her back at 8:20, she didn't reply. Hours later, at 11:43, she messaged again, "Finally leaving now. Exhausted." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But the next day, I noticed something odd. A mutual acquaintance had posted a group photo on Instagram around 9:15 the night before, inside a bar across town. And there she was, standing front and center, wine glass in hand, smiling for the camera. When I asked her about it casually, she shrugged. "Oh, I did stay late. Then a few of us grabbed a quick drink. Forgot to mention it." Her tone was light, dismissive, like I was unreasonable for even raising the question. That was the first data point. A lie, not catastrophic, but deliberate. And once you find one, you start looking for more. I began cross-referencing everything. If she said she was at home, I'd notice if the background noise on the phone call didn't match. If she claimed she was with a certain friend, I'd check social media to see if that friend had actually posted from the same location. More often than not, there were gaps, tiny cracks that revealed she wasn't where she said she was, or wasn't with who she claimed. I started taking screenshots. I'd capture her messages, then pair them with timestamps from posts, photos, or even weather reports. I created folders labeled by date, each containing a small collection of evidence. On the surface, it might have looked obsessive, but to me, it was methodical. If she was mocking my loyalty, I wanted to know exactly why. One night in particular stands out. She told me she was too tired to see me after work. She claimed she was going straight home. But at 9:36 p.m., her location popped up on Snapchat maps. She hadn't disabled it yet. She wasn't home. She was downtown, less than a block from the same bar I'd seen her in before. The next morning, she texted, "Thanks for understanding last night. I needed to rest." I saved everything. The message. The screenshot of her location. The timestamp. It was irrefutable. Still, I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because evidence without strategy is just noise. If I showed her what I had too soon, she'd adjust, get smarter, cover her tracks better. I couldn't afford that. I needed to build a full picture before making a move. So I stayed quiet. Outwardly, I was the same Adrian she'd always known, reliable, steady, loyal. I still showed up when she asked, still listened when she vented, still kept my tone calm and even. But underneath, I was recording everything. A silent archive of truth she didn't know existed. And as the weeks stretched on, the archive grew heavier. More screenshots. More timestamps. More contradictions. Each one was another nail in the coffin of her lies, another chip at the facade she presented to the world. What struck me most wasn't just the deceit itself, but the arrogance that came with it. She believed I would never notice. She believed my loyalty made me blind, that I would accept her words at face value forever. She mistook patience for ignorance, and devotion for weakness. She was wrong. Because while she laughed, while she mocked, while she wove her stories, I was building something behind the scenes. Something she couldn't laugh away. Something she wouldn't see coming until it was too late. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about proof. And proof has a way of cutting sharper than any words. When you carry evidence in silence, the world begins to feel heavier. On the surface, everything looks the same, but beneath it all, pressure builds. Every laugh she forced in public, every dismissive shrug when I questioned her late nights, every text that contradicted her actions, they all added weight to the dam I was building inside myself. And like any dam, it couldn't hold forever. The change didn't happen overnight. It crept in, subtle at first. I stopped rushing to reply to her texts. I stopped volunteering to fix every inconvenience in her life. My smiles grew tighter, my voice flatter, my patience thinner. She noticed, but she didn't understand why. To her, loyalty had always seemed infinite, a bottomless well she could draw from without consequence. Now that the well was running dry, she grew agitated. Her friends noticed too. At dinners or gatherings, they glanced between us, sensing the chill that had replaced our easy rhythm. I caught one of them pulling her aside after a brunch, whispering something with a pointed look in my direction. When I asked what it was about, she brushed it off with a laugh. "They think you're too serious lately. Maybe you should lighten up." But it wasn't about being serious. It was about being awake. The tension reached a new height at her coworker's birthday party. It was one of those loud, crowded nights in a downtown bar, music pumping, lights flashing. She clung to me at first, introducing me to people with the same tired jokes about my loyalty. "Adrian's the dependable one. He's like my human safety net." The crowd laughed, but I barely reacted anymore. Later that night, I stepped outside for air and found myself standing with two of her colleagues. They were drunk, loose-lipped, and one of them leaned toward me with a grin. "Man, you must have the patience of a saint," he said. "The way she talks about you. I couldn't handle it." The other chuckled. "She's wild. Fun, though. Must keep you guessing, huh?" Their words were meant lightly, but they landed like daggers. Fun. Guessing. Mockery thinly veiled as humor. I forced a smile, but inside, the dam cracked wider. Even strangers could see what she was doing, and instead of feeling pity for me, they treated it as entertainment. By then, my archive of evidence had grown substantial. Screenshots, timestamps, voice notes, and subtle contradictions. I had organized them into folders labeled by month, each one a dossier of her lies. But collecting evidence wasn't enough anymore. The pressure inside me demanded release, not just in silence, but in strategy. I needed a plan. And yet, despite everything, I didn't act impulsively. That's the part that surprises people when I tell this story. They expect me to have confronted her in anger, to have exploded in the heat of the moment. But anger is sloppy, and sloppy doesn't win. Justice requires precision. So I swallowed my emotions, letting them simmer, while outwardly maintaining the role she expected me to play. Loyal. Predictable. The man who wouldn't walk away. But the cracks were showing. She started to push harder, maybe sensing her grip slipping. She accused me of being distant, of not trying anymore. One night, after another pointless argument about why I hadn't rushed to pick her up from drinks with friends, she spat out, "You used to worship me. Now you're just boring." Those words stuck in my head like a splinter. Worship. Boring. To her, loyalty had never been love, it was adoration, servitude, a stage for her to perform superiority. And now that I was pulling back, she was restless, almost panicked. The irony was, the more she pushed, the more evidence she handed me. Angry texts laced with contradictions, late-night excuses that didn't line up, slip-ups where she forgot what lie she'd told last time. Each misstep went straight into my archive, neatly catalogued. I didn't argue anymore. I didn't accuse. I just nodded, smiled faintly, and saved everything. That's when friends and coworkers began noticing the difference, not just in me, but in her. The polished mask she wore in public started to crack under the pressure. She snapped at small things, laughed too loudly at jokes, and avoided direct eye contact whenever my silence grew too heavy. People started asking questions, not directly, but in that sideways way. "You two okay? Seem a little tense lately. Everything good between you?" Every question was another fracture in her facade. The world around her was beginning to sense what I already knew. The story she told about us didn't add up. And that's when I realized something crucial. I didn't need to destroy her. All I needed to do was let the truth speak. And the truth was already pressing against the surface, waiting for the right moment to break through. The pressure cooker was reaching its limit. And soon, it would explode. Evidence in fragments is just noise. Screenshots, timestamps, half-truths, and contradictions, they mean nothing until you line them up and let the pattern reveal itself. That's what I did. Like any good engineer, I treated the situation like a system failure. You don't just note one error log, you collect them, cross-reference them, and identify the root cause. By this point, I had months of material. Dozens of late-night texts that didn't align with social media posts. Messages that claimed exhaustion followed by photos of her smiling at bars. Excuses about being with one friend when that same friend posted from across town at the same moment. Each individual piece might have been explained away, but together, they painted a picture so consistent it was impossible to ignore. I started organizing the evidence into a digital journal. Each entry had a date, time, claim, and proof of contradiction. For example, July 14th, 10:42 p.m., she texts, "Going to bed early, rough day." July 14th, 11:08 p.m., tagged in a group photo at a rooftop lounge, drink in hand. August 3rd, 7:15 p.m., says she's with her coworker Hannah. August 3rd, 7:48 p.m., Hannah's Instagram story shows her on vacation in Florida. September 22nd, 8:11 p.m., claims she's home watching Netflix. September 22nd, 8:36 p.m., background noise in her call includes loud music and clinking glasses, later matched to a live stream posted from a local bar at the exact time. I even began noting her tone, cataloging patterns in the way she dismissed me. Words like relax, stop being paranoid, and you always overthink appeared again and again in her responses whenever I asked for clarification. The repetition wasn't accidental, it was deflection, a strategy to make me doubt myself. Gaslighting, dressed up as casual annoyance. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became, she wasn't just careless, she was calculated. Her lies weren't random, they followed rhythms. She always used the same excuses. She always underestimated how much information the digital world leaves behind. She assumed no one would bother connecting the dots. But I did. One night, I printed a handful of the clearest contradictions and spread them across my desk. Paper, not screens, because I wanted to see it with my own eyes. The pages formed a timeline, weeks and months of deception laid bare. Looking at it, I felt a strange calm wash over me. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't insecurity. This was proof. Yet proof without purpose is wasted. So I asked myself, what was the endgame? Did I want revenge? Did I want to humiliate her the way she humiliated me? Or did I want something quieter, sharper, justice that couldn't be denied? The answer came slowly but firmly. I wanted the truth to dismantle her lies, piece by piece. I wanted her to face what she had done not through accusation, but through undeniable contradiction. To corner her with facts so tight she couldn't wriggle out, couldn't twist the story into another mockery. That's when I began refining my approach. I created a master file, an encrypted folder with everything neatly laid out. Each entry cross-referenced with screenshots, metadata, and supporting context. It read less like a collection of suspicions and more like a case file. If anyone looked at it, they wouldn't see a jealous boyfriend's notes. They'd see an investigation. And in a way, that's what it was. I wasn't just a man collecting proof. I was an investigator building a case, waiting for the right moment to present it. The more I connected the dots, the more her mask slipped in real time. She grew careless, maybe believing she still had me under control. She'd brag about nights out, only to forget the story she told me earlier. She'd insist she was home, only for the sound of voices to leak through the phone. I didn't even have to dig as hard anymore, the evidence practically fell into my lap. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because this wasn't about winning a single argument, it was about winning the war. If I showed my hand too soon, she'd deny, deflect, and cover her tracks better. No, the trap had to be perfect. Seamless. Irrefutable. So I kept collecting. Kept connecting. Kept sharpening the edges of the truth into a blade she wouldn't see until it was pressed to her throat. And all the while, I stayed quiet. Outwardly, I was the same Adrian she thought she could mock. Inwardly, I was already preparing the moment when her laughter would turn to silence. The dots were connected. The picture was clear. Now all that remained was to wait for the perfect opportunity to deliver the blow. Every investigation has that one moment, the fracture where the truth stops being scattered fragments and becomes undeniable. For me, it came on an otherwise ordinary Tuesday night, the kind of evening that should have disappeared into the blur of routine. But instead, it gave me the piece of evidence that turned suspicion into certainty. She had told me she was working late again. A deadline, she said, something her manager had pushed onto her at the last minute. The words were familiar, almost rehearsed. She'd used that excuse enough times that it had lost its edge, but I didn't challenge her. I nodded, murmured something supportive, and told her not to overwork herself. Outwardly, I was calm. Inwardly, I marked the timestamp, 7:42 p.m. and waited. At 9:13, I received a casual text, "Still here, wrapping up." I saved it like I always did, tucking it into the digital archive. But then, something unexpected happened. At 9:18, my phone buzzed again, not from her, but from a colleague at my own job. He was sharing a funny meme in our work group chat. I laughed, scrolled through the replies, and that's when it hit me. One of the names in the group chat thread wasn't from my office at all, it was from her office. I'd forgotten she and one of her coworkers followed me on social media, and occasionally, We ended up in the same group threads when memes circulated widely. Out of curiosity, I clicked the coworker's profile. And there it was, a freshly uploaded photo. A group selfie, timestamped at 9:11 p.m., geotagged at a restaurant halfway across town. And in the corner of that photo, smiling, glass of red wine in hand, was her. I sat back in my chair, the glow of my laptop reflecting off the screen. The precision of it stunned me. Not just the photo itself, but the timestamps. She had sent me a message at 9:13 claiming she was still at work. 2 minutes earlier, she had been photographed laughing in a restaurant. The overlap was perfect, irrefutable, a contradiction locked in time. I didn't confront her. Not then. Instead, I downloaded the photo, saved the metadata, and paired it with her text. I even took a video recording of my screen to capture the timeline in real time, scrolling from her message to the photo post, the clock in the corner of my computer visible the whole way. It wasn't just proof, it was airtight proof. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying her words from months ago, her laughter, her mockery, her friends joining in as she reduced me to a punchline. And now, here it was, the moment where the mask slipped entirely. No more excuses, no more room for doubt. The next day, she acted like nothing had happened. She texted me in the morning, coffee's saving me today. So tired after that late night. My chest tightened as I read it. She had no idea I was holding the smoking gun. But I stayed quiet. My silence was more powerful than any accusation. Because silence is where strategy grows. Over the next week, I began weaving the breakthrough into the broader timeline. Every piece of evidence I'd collected, every screenshot, every contradiction, suddenly had a centerpiece. The Tuesday night timestamp wasn't just another log, it was the keystone, the proof that aligned everything else. With it, I could frame the rest of her lies in a way no one could deny. The knowledge changed me. I started observing her differently. Every word she spoke felt like another performance, another attempt to maintain the illusion. But I no longer felt powerless. I no longer felt mocked. I felt patient, calculating, almost surgical in the way I held the truth close while she continued to talk herself deeper into the trap. The beauty of the breakthrough was in its simplicity. She could argue with my interpretations. She could deny intent. But she couldn't rewrite time. The timestamp, the metadata, the photo, all of it existed outside of her control. That was the kind of evidence no laughter, no mockery, no manipulation could erase. And as I looked at her across the table one evening, smiling as though the lies between us weren't suffocating the room, I realized something. She thought she was still in control. She thought I was still the loyal, predictable man she could manipulate endlessly. She had no idea that the ground beneath her had already cracked. And I was the one holding the lever that would finally split it wide open. When you know the truth but the other person doesn't know you know, there's power in that silence. Every word they speak, every excuse they invent, every laugh they force, it all becomes evidence against them. By the time I had the breakthrough, my archive was overflowing. The keystone timestamp was unshakable, but the real strategy was figuring out how to use it. A trap isn't just about proof, it's about timing, delivery, and exposure. I decided the confrontation couldn't happen in private. Alone, she would deny everything, twist my words, maybe even find a way to make me look like the insecure one. No, I needed a setting where the truth would corner her without escape, where witnesses would see her lies collapse in real time. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. She invited me to dinner with a few of her closest friends, 3 women who had always seemed half in awe of her, half wary of her sharp tongue. She must have believed her control over me was still intact, because she smirked when she said, "You'll come, right? They love when you tag along. You're like dependable wallpaper." I smiled faintly and said, "Of course." That night, I dressed carefully, nothing flashy, just clean and deliberate. I carried my phone, its folders loaded with evidence, and a small external drive in my pocket, a backup of everything I'd collected. As I walked into the restaurant, I felt an eerie calm settle over me. This wasn't just dinner. This was the stage. The evening began the way it always did, with her in command. She told stories, exaggerated for effect, painting herself as bold and clever while reducing me to the butt of her jokes. "Adrian's too loyal," she said at one point, swirling her wine glass. "Honestly, I could tell him anything and he'd believe me. It's almost cute." Her friends laughed politely, though I noticed the flicker of discomfort in their eyes. They weren't laughing with her anymore, they were laughing because they didn't know what else to do. That's when I leaned forward, my voice steady. "Actually," I said, "that's not true." The table fell silent. She blinked at me, caught off guard. What do you mean? I pulled out my phone, unlocking the folder I had prepared. I mean, loyalty isn't blindness. It's trust. And trust is only as strong as the truth behind it. I set the phone down on the table and opened the Keystone file, the text she sent me at 9:13 p.m., claiming she was still at work, displayed side by side with the photo timestamped at 9:11 p.m. in the restaurant across town. Her friends leaned in. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to shock as they saw the contradictions spelled out in undeniable detail. She froze, her smirk collapsing. That's not. Not what? I asked quietly. Not your message? Not your face in that photo? Not the timestamp that proves you lied? Her mouth opened, closed. Her friends glanced at each other, the tension thick in the air. I didn't stop there. One by one, I opened more files. Screenshots of texts, paired with social media posts that exposed the lies. Audio clips where the background betrayed her location. A printed copy I had tucked in my jacket, which I laid on the table like a dossier. Each piece was neat, organized, undeniable. Her friends didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their silence was louder than anything. She reached for her wine glass, her hand trembling slightly. You've been spying on me, she hissed, trying to reclaim control. I shook my head. No. I've been listening. Recording. Documenting. You told me I was too loyal to see the truth. But loyalty doesn't mean stupidity. It means patience. And patience gave me time to see you for who you really are. Her face paled. She glanced at her friends, perhaps hoping for support, but none came. They were staring at her with new eyes now, seeing the cracks in her facade, the arrogance stripped bare by evidence too sharp to deny. The trap had sprung. And she knew it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I simply stood, slid the external drive across the table toward her, and said, "This is everything. Every lie. Every contradiction. Keep it. You'll need it more than I do." Then I left her there, surrounded not by laughter, but by silence, the silence of people who finally saw her truth. Walking out of that restaurant, I felt lighter than I had in months. Not because the confrontation had ended, but because I knew this was only the beginning. Exposure is a process, and the public unraveling had only just begun. Confrontation strips away illusions, but exposure is what makes them impossible to rebuild. The dinner with her friends had been the first fracture, her smirk breaking, her carefully curated image slipping, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. People like her are skilled at damage control. She could spin that night as me being obsessive, insecure, even controlling. Her friends had seen the evidence, yes, but whispers fade. If I wanted the truth to last, if I wanted her mockery to collapse once and for all, I needed something stronger. Something permanent. That's where credibility came in. Proof is powerful, but proof delivered through a trusted channel becomes irrefutable. And I had just the opportunity. One of my colleagues at the medical tech company, Lauren, ran a popular online forum dedicated to accountability in relationships, stories backed by verifiable evidence, a community where people shared experiences of betrayal with screenshots, metadata, and timestamps. I'd seen posts go viral there, exposing lies with cold precision. Unlike casual gossip, this forum thrived on receipts, and the moderators required strict verification before anything went live. For weeks, I debated whether to submit my case. It felt invasive, almost vindictive. But then I remembered the way she laughed in that living room, wine in hand, as she told her friends I was her pathetic guard dog. I remembered the coworkers calling me a saint because she paraded my loyalty like a joke. And I remembered the silence of her friends when they saw the truth for the first time. This wasn't vindictiveness, it was justice. So I compiled everything. I created a clean, chronological file, screenshots of her texts, paired with social media posts, call logs synced with ambient audio mismatches, the Keystone timestamp with the 9/11 photo and the 9/13 text. Each entry included metadata details, time zones, file origins, even the original links where available. I blurred out names of uninvolved parties, ensuring only the relevant pieces remained. When I was done, it looked less like a breakup dossier and more like a forensic report. Submitting it felt like crossing a threshold. The moderators reviewed the file, asked clarifying questions, and after 3 days of back and forth, they approved it. My story went live under the title, "When Loyalty Becomes the Punchline, a Case Study in Contempt and Betrayal." Within hours, it spread. Comments poured in, hundreds, then thousands, people dissecting the evidence, offering sympathy, even outrage. Strangers validated what I had known in silence. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't weak. I was methodical, patient, and thorough. The ripple effect hit her faster than I expected. She messaged me in a fury, "What the hell did you do?" She accused me of ruining her reputation, of making her look bad in front of her friends, co-workers, even family. The irony nearly made me laugh. She had mocked my loyalty as weakness, yet the only thing making her look bad was her own lies, laid bare in her own words, her own photos, her own timestamps. Her friends, the same ones who once chuckled at her jokes, stopped defending her. One even messaged me privately, "I didn't realize how deep it went. I'm sorry for laughing that night." She made it seem harmless. Her workplace caught wind of it too. Someone recognized the locations tagged in the photos, and whispers spread through the office. I hadn't mentioned her company by name, but people connect dots quickly. The woman who once thrived on commanding rooms with her sharp tongue now found herself being watched with suspicion. The mocking laughter she loved so much had turned into murmurs behind her back. For me, the exposure wasn't about humiliation, it was about balance. She had taken my loyalty, twisted it into weakness, and built her pride on top of it. By making the truth public, I returned that power to where it belonged. The forum thread continued to grow, archived by thousands of readers who would never forget the case. She could try to deny it in conversation, spin stories to those who hadn't read it, but the receipts lived online now, permanent and undeniable. And that permanence was what she could never erase. For the first time, she wasn't the one holding the narrative. She wasn't the one laughing while others nodded along. She was the subject of documentation, the example people pointed to when talking about contempt and betrayal. And I was no longer her punchline. Exposure changes people. Some double down, clinging to their lies until the bitter end. Others crumble quickly, the weight of truth too heavy to carry. She was the latter. For months, she had thrived on arrogance, mocking my loyalty as though it were some cheap party trick. But once her stories collapsed under the weight of proof, her confidence evaporated. And in its place came something I never expected to see from her: desperation. It began with silence. After the forum post went viral, she stopped texting me for a few days. No good morning messages, no sarcastic remarks, no demands. Just nothing. I thought she might finally retreat into pride, nursing her ego in private. But then, late one night, my phone buzzed. "Adrian, please. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. For weeks, she had dismissed me. For months, she had laughed at me. And now, suddenly, she wanted conversation. I didn't reply. The next day, another message: "I know I messed up. I didn't mean for it to go this far." Followed by, "You've always been the one person I could count on. Please don't hate me." It would have been almost funny if it weren't so pitiful. She had mocked that very dependability in front of her friends, reducing me to a joke about guard dogs and butlers. Now she clung to it like a life raft. The messages kept coming. Long paragraphs where she blamed stress, loneliness, even alcohol for her behavior. Half apologies tangled with excuses, each one ending with some version of "I miss you" or "I need you." At one point, she even tried to twist the narrative back on me: "You embarrassed me. You didn't have to post all that." But the turning point came when she showed up at my apartment unannounced. It was a rainy evening, the kind where the city feels muted under gray skies. A knock echoed at my door, and when I opened it, she was standing there, makeup streaked, hair clinging to her face, eyes red from crying. The same woman who once smirked at me in front of an audience now looked small, almost fragile. "Adrian," she whispered, voice trembling, "please. I'm sorry." She stepped forward, but I didn't move. I let her words hang in the air. She kept talking, begging, bargaining, her sentences unraveling into sobs. She said she didn't mean to hurt me. That she only joked because she was insecure. That I was the best thing that had ever happened to her. She even admitted, haltingly, that some of the lies were about other people, nights out she didn't want me to know about because she thought I'd overreact. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse her. I just stood there, silent, letting her desperation echo in the same air that once carried her laughter at my expense. For the first time, she felt the imbalance. The power had shifted entirely. She wasn't the one in control anymore. She was the one scrambling, clinging, trying to rewrite a story already written in her own words and actions. And here's the thing about reversals: they don't need vengeance to be effective. They just need contrast. The woman who mocked my loyalty now begged for it. The one who called me predictable now pleaded for my forgiveness. I let her talk until her voice cracked and her apologies blurred into repetition. Then I spoke, slowly, deliberately. "You wanted me to be loyal when it suited you. You mocked me when it didn't. Now you want forgiveness because the truth is out there. But forgiveness isn't something you demand, it's something you earn. And you haven't earned it. Her face crumpled. She reached for me, but I stepped back. That was the moment it hit her fully. Not just the exposure, not just the loss of her reputation, but the loss of me. The certainty she once had, that I would always be there, no matter how cruel she was gone. She left that night, shoulders hunched, sobs muffled by the rain. I watched her disappear down the street, the sound of her footsteps fading into silence. The reversal was complete. The woman who once mocked my devotion was now defined by her own desperation. And for me, that silence, her absence, her collapse, was louder than any revenge could ever be. After she left that night, soaked in rain and desperation, my apartment felt unnaturally still. No more buzzing phone, no more demands, no more laughter at my expense lingering in the air. Just silence. And silence, I realized, was the purest form of justice. Because revenge is loud, messy, and fleeting. Justice is quiet, steady, undeniable. And what I had built, my archive, my case, my exposure, wasn't a revenge fantasy. It was a structure of truth she could never dismantle. The aftermath unfolded in ways I couldn't have scripted better if I'd tried. Her friends, the same ones who once laughed at her cruel jokes, drifted away. One by one, they stopped showing up for her invitations, stopped liking her posts, stopped engaging with her stories. I didn't ask them to. The evidence had done all the talking. People don't like being complicit in cruelty once they've seen the receipts. At work, the damage was subtler but deeper. Whispers followed her into meetings. Co-workers who once joined her for drinks after hours now politely declined. She hadn't lost her job, not yet, but she'd lost the one thing she valued even more, her influence. The sharp-tongued woman who loved being the center of attention now found herself sitting at the edges, her laughter forced, her stories ignored. She tried reaching out again. A few more texts, softer this time. Can we at least talk? I just need closure. But I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. My silence was the answer, and she knew it. For me, life settled into something calmer. Friends who had once teased me about being too loyal now spoke of me differently. Respect replaced pity. One even told me, "I don't know how you stayed so composed. Most people would have blown up, but you dismantled her." And maybe that was the point. I hadn't needed to scream, or argue, or humiliate her in some dramatic showdown. I had simply done what I always did best, stayed steady, collected the facts, and waited for the right moment. Patience had always been my strength. She mistook it for weakness. That was her mistake. Sometimes I think back to that night, the living room filled with laughter, her friends roaring as she called me a dog, a butler, a fool for being loyal. I remember the sting, the humiliation, the way I stood frozen with takeout in my hands. That was the moment she thought she had won. The moment she believed her mockery was unshakable. And yet, that was also the moment her downfall began. Because loyalty, when mocked, doesn't die, it transforms. It sharpens. It waits. In the end, she begged for forgiveness. But forgiveness wasn't mine to give, not anymore. What she wanted wasn't absolution, it was restoration. She wanted me to step back into the role she had ridiculed, to carry her weight again so she could pretend the exposure never happened. But I had already given her my loyalty once. And she had mocked it. So I gave her something else instead, quiet justice. And my final words to her, the last time we ever spoke, were simple, measured, unforgettable. You turned my loyalty into a joke. Now the silence that follows you is the punchline.